Hey guys, Wes here with Airsoft. Today we're going to be installing a PolarStar F2 into a Krytac body. If you guys are just here for installing the engine inside of the gearbox, go ahead and skip to the timestamp in the description below. Otherwise, let's start from the beginning. First thing we're going to do is actually pull off our upper receiver. So go ahead and grab your 2.5 millimeter Allen key and unscrew that front pin. Set that off to the side. Sometimes you can just hit it with your hand, but other times it requires an actual punch. All right, pull out your front body pin. I suggest that you screw your screw 1 or 2 times into it. That way you don't lose it. From here, you're gonna just go ahead and pull off your upper receiver and set that to the side because we won't be using it for a little while. You can also set your engine off to the side because that won't be needed at the moment. Now you're gonna go ahead, press the 2 tabs right there on the side, pull off your butt plate and set that to the side. Now you can also pull your stock all the way out, pull downward on this right here and pull it off. You can also set this to the side. Now with that off, you're going to go ahead and grab your Phillips head screwdriver. With the Krytacs though, you do have this MOSFET, not the MOSFET, the fuse in the way. I would suggest kind of pulling this out of the way. It's kind of difficult with that angle, but pull your fuse out and set it to the side. That way you have more room to insert your screwdriver, and it makes life a lot easier. So go ahead and unscrew your Phillips head screw. Now you're going to have to force this all back through. And Krytacs have a, unlike G&Gs, they have a disc, like a washer and screw style. So you're going to have to maneuver that around until this comes out. I suggest just keeping this together and you can set it to the side. So now with that removed, it clears up enough space for the fuse and the Tamiya connector to come through the buffer tube. You no longer need your buffer tube. Sling plate will follow, very, very simple. From here, I just go ahead before I forget, because I tend to forget a lot of things, is grabbing your 1.5 millimeter Allen key and removing your ambidextrous fire selector lever, and I just remove the screw and the selector lever and just set them both to the side. That way everything you need stays together. So now we're going to come down here, and as you can see, it has a quality control sticker. So just use either like your really small Allen key or in my case a picky tool or your fingernail, anything. There is glue that's in the threads sometimes from the sticker. I suggest you get all that out so you don't strip your screw. But from here, use your Phillips head that you use to remove your buffer tube screw, or a smaller one depending on how large your Phillips head was when you removed your buffer tube screw, and remove the 2 screws at the bottom of the grip plate. And from here, I like to leave this upright and just setting it off to the side. So these motor tabs are really easy to take off. They're a little thicker. They're reinforced so they don't, like, the sheathing doesn't short out or anything like that. It's actually pretty nice. Now if you do get a Krytac with a 30K, I do suggest that you hold on to it, and possibly you could use it for another build, because the 30K Krytac motors are actually really, really good motors, and they're super torquey. So if you ever wanted to build something else, I would suggest you try out a Krytac motor first. So from here, pull out the 2 Phillips head screws at the bottom of the grip here. If you can, leave them still in the grip when you take it apart. If not, it's no big deal. It's just going to make installation a little easier if they're left inside the grip. From here, give it a little wiggle, pull it out like so, and that can be set on its side, and the screws should not fall out. Here, you can go ahead and pull your bolt catch off. It is functional technically. It's not functional in the sense that it will keep the gun from functioning, but if you want to keep your bolt catch function, go ahead and set that to the side. From here, you're going to take out your mag release, little baby Phillips head screwdriver, and just remove that. So once again, I like to keep everything together, so keep your button and your screw together, set that to the side, set that with the spring, and the bar side of the mag release, and that all can be set at the side. I tend to keep that in a little pile, that way there's no confusion. Eventually you just know where things go, but if this is your first time ever installing something, I suggest you keep the things that stay together. So now you're going to go ahead and remove the rear body pin. This is going to require a 2.5mm Allen key as well. Sometimes it just cracks right off like so, and sometimes it'll actually spin the pin on the other side. If that does happen, you can either try to just snap this really quickly, and sometimes it'll just break it loose. Other times you're going to have to get a pair of needle nose or a very small set of like vice grips and grab onto this from the outside to keep it from spinning. Unfortunately, yeah, it's just what you have to do. But this one worked out really, really well. And just to help this pin come out, you just elevate the rear of the body. Give it a few nice little taps like so, and that'll come right out. Thread these together like 1 or 2 turns, that way you know where they go. And you don't lose them. So moving to the floor pin, the one side is enlarged to keep the pin from falling out. It has grooves on it, so if you look directly down onto the floor pin, you can tell which side is smooth and which side is not. You want to hit the smooth side and force the grooved side out. You don't want to force the grooved side through because it's larger. So if you're not sure, give it a few little taps and flip it over, and as you can maybe see, you probably can't, but you can see a tiny bit of grooved portion of the pin sticking out, so you know you're going in the right direction. Don't force it all the way through, then look, because if you do that, then it's going to suck putting it all the way back through. So from here, you're going to take your fire selector and put it into a 45-degree position, essentially between safety and semi, and your gearbox should rock out of place. Sometimes you have to position it a little differently and force it out, but the 45 is kind of like a rule of thumb. All right, so now that your gearbox is out of your lower receiver, this can be set to the side. So as you can see, something already fell off. This is your ambidextrous selector gear. Just be cautious when you take it apart. It might fall out. Sometimes it stays, sometimes it does not. So over here, you're going to go ahead and not jump right into the main gearbox screws. You want to remove the fire selector lever piece. It's right there. And it's a Phillips head screwdriver. The same one you used to take off your mag release will work just fine. Just something to note, when you take this out, the screw does not actually need to come all the way out of the plastic piece. It can stay in there, that way when reinstalling it makes it a lot easier. There's also a little baby spring that gives the button tension so the bolt catch can work. And that's all that needs to come out over there. Now go ahead and flip your gearbox over and you will see this little geared piece over here. You're going to go ahead and use that same screwdriver again and loosen that screw all the way. And from there, you can pick up this gear and leave the screw in there. That way there's no confusion when putting it back together. So now that you have those two pieces removed, you are ready to take apart the gearbox. First thing, you just need to pull another one of these quality control or warranty stickers. I don't know if they're quality. This one's not quality control, but the other one does say QC, I'm pretty sure. All right, so now that you got your sticker off of your screw, the nice thing about Krytacs is they have this quick change spring. So you can either use a Phillips head screwdriver on the back right here, or in my case, I'm just going to use my thumb and push and twist until these line up. And be careful because it does have some spring tension on there, and it'll release your spring guide. And now this way, when you remove all your screws, there is no tension under the gearbox shell. So when you go to remove it, you have nothing to worry about. So after that's removed and you've released the pressure of the gearbox shell, go ahead and start removing your screws. Something to note on Krytacs is they have an extra screw compared to most standard version 2 gearboxes. That would be located right here. Normally it's just a screw here and these two, but this one is an extra. So just so you're not concerned or worried why your gearbox isn't coming apart, because sometimes it's overlooked if you've worked on standard AEGs before. So now that you got all your screws released from your gearbox shell, you should be able to just lift it right off. Krytac shells are sometimes a little annoying to get off. If they are, go ahead and just grab a flathead screwdriver and just kind of work it off. They fit really, really well. That's kind of why they are a little difficult. But go ahead and take the top portion of your gearbox shell off. Grab a bag of some sort just to keep everything organized, and start throwing all the parts that we are not going to be using, which would include pretty much everything other than the trigger spring and screw holding in your trigger contacts. Everything else can get removed. Now, sometimes taking off the anti-reversal latch, since it's on a post and it's not a standalone, you have to apply pressure from a tool because it gets stuck. It's quite interesting, but you'll figure it out and get it off. Taking things apart is always the easiest, especially when the things don't have to go back in. So from here, you can remove your trigger contact spring. Now you're going to go ahead and grab your little Phillips head screwdriver and the screw towards the higher screw, not the one on the white piece of plastic here, this one up here, and remove that. Now you're not going to need that. That's just going to release your MOSFET. You can go ahead and yank your trigger out. Keep the spring. If it stays attached, it makes life a little easier. Then go ahead and remove your cutoff lever right here. Then go ahead and take off the small black screw on your orange trigger contacts. And when I say it's small, it is extremely small. But go ahead and set that off to the side next to your trigger. That way you know everything goes in that general vicinity. So now you can go ahead and rip off the wiring, and I like to fold it up like I said in a previous video and shove that all into a bag. Oop, don't forget your anti-reversal latch. All right, so now you can make some room, set your gearbox shell aside, and grab your F2 unit. So just confirm that this is the proper unit for your gun. Whoa, this is new. That's pretty cool. Cool, so they've updated their thing. The wire harness, the sheathing is now fancy. And just make sure you look in there and make sure nothing's stuck. Get a new sticker. It no longer says F2. I guess PolarStar's changing some stuff up. So this is your instruction manual. If you need it, use it. If you just want to follow this video, set it to the side. So here we are with our trigger board and FCU. You are going to want to go ahead and pull your trigger board out. Before we go ahead and just drop this in, the problem with it is you can't just drop this in. The reason being, when you go to put this where it's supposed to go, there is this lip of metal right here, which was put in the gearbox to guide the wires from the trigger contacts. The problem is it blocks the extended trigger board because of the fact that it's an F2. This is where it does tend to get a little annoying because there's going to be a lot of dremeling required, and if you don't have a Dremel, I highly recommend you get one because I couldn't imagine hand filing this. It actually takes quite a while with a Dremel. So what we're going to do is essentially just take this lip of metal and Dremel it down about halfway. So I'm going to go Dremel this down and then show you what it looks like. All right, we're back. As you can see from the pictures that were just put on the screen, that's what we had to remove. Now that we've confirmed that the trigger board fits into the gearbox shell, you want to go ahead and tighten your macro line to the actual engine. So once you've tightened this onto the unit, you're going to see that the trigger board has 2 ports, well, 3 ports technically. The large port will go to your wire harness, and the 2 ports will go to the 2 wires coming off of the solenoids. Now you might be wondering which one goes to each port. Now if you go into your instruction manual, it tells you which solenoid goes to which port. According to this, the nozzle solenoid, the upper one, which would be this one, right there, goes to the nozzle port, which would be the back port onto the trigger board. So after you've plugged that up, it's kind of a process of elimination at that point. The other one's going to go into the other 2-prong hole, leaving the only opening to the wire harness. So when installing the wire harness, a little tip would be to confirm which direction this is going in and bend it like so. That way when installing, you can grab it with your fingernail and pull it right into the port. So now that everything is hooked up to the trigger board, you can go ahead and set it into its new home inside of your gearbox. Now you're going to grab your super tiny screw that you took off of your Krytac. So now that that's in there, just tighten it enough so the trigger board doesn't wobble around. And something I like to do is you can rotate the unit so that the wires going to the solenoid are under the macro line. It just keeps everything a little more snug. Now you can go ahead and take this wire harness, and I keep it running straight across here, then comes down, and then you can run it through this channel. You want to run it through the channel because that is where the wires went previously when it was an electric gun. Now it is HPA'd. So the wire harness should fit into this groove quite nicely. It actually is very satisfying when it holds it in place and fits snug, so you have nothing to worry about there. Now you're going to go ahead and take your trigger and reinstall that. And like I said in a previous video, triggers can be very, very finicky, but once you get the hang of it, you get the hang of it. So after you got that installed, just confirm that your trigger functions like it should. And from here, you're going to go ahead and run your macro line out the bottom of the gearbox shell, like so. Now you can take your upper half of the gearbox and confirm that it presses down everywhere evenly. Sometimes you have to push your safety arm back upwards. Sometimes it gets caught in between. But yeah, it's flush all the way around now. And the convenient part of these is now you can just take one of the screws and now when I install, I like to start in the front here and then work towards the back like that. That way you're just kind of applying pressure evenly as you install it. It's really not important, but just to keep everything in place, that's what I like to do. So now that everything is installed like that, I did go get another razor blade because I'm sick of opening stuff without it, and crack open your FCU. Go ahead and grab yourself a battery that just appeared from Jesse. Plug your wire harness into your FCU. It only goes in one way. Plug this up, and the nice thing about PolarStars is voila, you can see your LCD screen. There's that, and it is in fact in full auto, so put it in the semi position. Semi, okay, and safety. So cool, your unit now works. Now that we've confirmed that the unit works, we're going to go ahead and reinstall things. So that little gear piece you took off earlier is going to go back into its home. It does have a specific way of going in. You just have to spin it around on its post. It has a notch cut out for it so it locks into place. Just spin it around until it falls into place. Your screw won't fall into place because that's why you need to tighten it so it goes into place. Now this, you can go ahead and put a fingernail on one of the teeth when you tighten it so it doesn't spin. You don't need to crank it. It doesn't need to be super duper tight. So now we're going to go ahead and do the bolt catch again. If you look down into the opening, you will see the post where this opening goes on. You just want to kind of make sure it falls onto the post. You'll know because it'll go deeper than it did before. And just make sure, these can sometimes be annoying because it's just one of those things where it just feels so tight, and I feel like I've had to shave a few of these before. But when you go to tighten your screw, if it goes in pretty easily, you know you're using the pre-existing threads because it's all plastic and with a metal screw, so if it's going to cross thread, it will cross thread. So if it gets really tight or you feel like it's too tight, Go ahead and back it back out and try again. You don't want it super tight, because if it's too tight, it won't work properly, so sometimes loosening it a little bit goes a long way. All right, so now that your bolt catch is completely installed, you're going to go ahead and flip your gun back over, or your gearbox, because we have to install the rest of our screws now that everything is installed. So now that all your screws are installed, we're going to go ahead and grab Gorilla Tape once again for nozzle alignment. It's only going to be about one piece. This can go right here on the gearbox. And take your razor blade and cut it, and that should be good. So this is something that's completely optional. It really does help with nozzle alignment left to right a lot easier. You can always add Gorilla Tape to the side when inspecting nozzle alignment and adjusting nozzle alignment, but this is something that's a little more permanent and in my opinion works really, really well. So right here, you're going to see a small hole that wasn't there before. I drill a small hole because, as you can see here, it is open, so a screw going through there is not a big deal at all. I have a lot of extra Pro-Win screws. They come with the Pro-Win hop-up units. They are supposed to be for adjusting the hop-up unit forward and back inside of the upper receiver. I find them useless because you just use O-rings and it works a heck of a lot better. So I have a ton of these little screws. What I do is drill a hole right here in the gearbox shell. These guns tend to have their nozzle alignment be to the left for some reason every single time. I don't quite understand why, but they do. So to compensate that, I add this screw. The Pro-Win screws are 1.5 millimeter Allen key, and the bit that we have actually makes the hole a perfect size, and it'll actually thread itself right in. If you guys want to do this, I highly doubt that you have a bunch of Pro-Win screws lying around. But what you can do is essentially get any, if it's a very small flathead or something along those lines, if you want to do that, you just drill a hole with the proper size drill bit, and that'll adjust your nozzle alignment left and right. You could also just add Gorilla Tape here. It's going to be a pretty thick amount, but it's super easy, and if it needs to go over a little more, just add one more layer. If it needs to come back, just take one more layer off. It does work. It's just I tend to like to do this, especially when we're building guns for customers. It looks a lot better, and it's just not just a bunch of tape in there. But if you don't have the tools available to you, don't worry, you can still get proper nozzle alignment. So now that that is installed, we are going to come back over to this side. As you can see over here, the fire selector, the main gear is in the upright position, straight up and down. So when you come back over here, this gear that fell out earlier has a home, and it's going to be in this opening right here. Now when you drop this in, you're going to see this groove right at the very tip of the gear, and then this has a ridge that's also can line up with it. So when this is in semi, over here it is straight up and down, and when you're over here, you want this to also be straight up and down. This essentially keeps your fire selectors lined up, so one's not like here and one's not here. It's simple, but you just want to confirm that. So when you go ahead and reinstall, the best way is I found to hold the gearbox like this, and what that does is you hold down this gear on the one side of the gearbox, and you can just hold the gearbox normally. So when installing it into your lower receiver, you want to run this through the back, and then the macro line through the main hole. And then when installing, go ahead and flip your selector back into the 45, and it'll line it right up. So if you are doing the screw method, the way you know how far out the screw needs to be is when you go ahead and put it in like so. You don't want it to be able to move back and forth. But when you put it in, you don't want it to be forced in. There's kind of a feel to it, but it honestly works really, really well. It just needs a little bit of resistance, like it's just scratching the inside of the gearbox with the screw. But you don't want it to be loose to the point where this shell can move back and forth, but you don't want it to be forced in. There's a middle ground, and it's very, very helpful. So now you can go ahead and add your floor pin back in, and your rear body pin, the rounded one. If you did forget, the rounded one is your rear body pin. The kind of half moon shaped one is the front body pin. confirm that it's flush with the side of the gearbox. And now you can pick up your 2.5mm Allen key and tighten this down. Now personally, I don't like to crank these down because then they're real pain to get off if you need to ever strip your gun down on the field for some reason. So picking up your grip again, you still have the screws still in the bottom of the grip, which makes it a lot easier. And that will get dropped down onto there. So find yourself your Phillips head and tighten these screws down. All right, so now that your grip is installed, I like to confirm that it at least does semi and whatnot. So coming back over here, you want to make sure your selector is installed correctly. You can see that the groove is pointed forward in safety. And if you look at the bottom here, there's the indent for the selector, which is always a good sign. The worst is when it's backwards and you want to cry because you've installed it incorrectly. But if you've done it right, you know right away. So go ahead and grab that 1.5mm Allen key again and hold the selector. That way it just doesn't go anywhere. And this does not need to be super tight. Once it stops, tiny bit more and you'll be good. This does have play to it, even if you were to crank it down, but you don't want to crank it down because 1.5mm Allen keys are so small that if you apply too much pressure, they do strip occasionally. But no need to worry. If you just put it on normally, you'll be a-okay. So now we can go ahead and grab our sling plate and slide that over like so. Now take your buffer tube. Now that your buffer tube is like so, you want to find yourself this. Now, something I have learned and something you should know is the larger portion is going to be where the wire slips over. So essentially it's going to go in like this. And when installing, these are very hard to just drop in. You almost can't do it. So you want to put your screwdriver in this opening, use the same hand to hold it like that. And when you put it into the buffer tube, you want to apply pressure with your screwdriver on the side. So you can't see it because it's dark, but my screwdriver never left the threads of the screw all the way down the buffer tube. That way, it goes right in. It can take a few tries, but it's honestly the easiest way in my opinion. As long as you have the end of the screwdriver onto that screw and you're applying pressure to the side of the buffer tube like this, it'll just have enough pressure for you to push it up and slide it all the way down, and you don't have to go fishing around for the head of the screw down there. It honestly makes life a lot easier, and if you can master that, it makes installation so much easier. So now we're going to go ahead and move to the magazine release, and you're going to want to go ahead and put in the bar side, hold it with your finger, flip it over while continuing to apply pressure to it. Grab your spring, slide that over, grab the button. When installing the button, I found it the easiest to press with both fingers until it bottoms out onto the bar where it's installed. Continue to apply pressure with this thumb so it stays bottomed out. That way, when you go ahead and pick up your Phillips head, there is no tension on this little screw, and you can install that with ease. And then once that bottoms out, just make sure it's snug but not tight, and that way confirm that it works and moves, and you're good to go. Now, go ahead and grab your fake bolt release or button and install it like that. Pick up your upper receiver. This should just slide right into place like so. I like to hold it like that to keep the holes aligned. Go ahead and pick up that front body pin. Flip your gun over and confirm that the flat end is facing the rear of the gun. That's where it lines up at. So give it a few nice taps until you kind of hear it get louder. It means it's kind of bottomed out. Grab your other screw and your 2.5mm Allen key. Make that one snug but not super duper tight. Makes life a lot easier. So now I'm kind of out of frame, but we're going to try to stay in frame. Go ahead and grab your FCU once again. And I want to confirm that it functions one more time, which nothing has changed really since, there we go. So now you can disconnect your battery, pick up your stock. Now you can either remove your FCU or just leave it on. Either way works. It just depends on what you'd like to do. And your FCU should come poking out the other side. I'm going to try to stay in frame, but it's kind of hard with two hands, like so. I'm going to go ahead and pull down on your stock release, and since it's trying to stay in frame, it's a little difficult, but slide that down until it clicks over, then you can operate it normally. Now, this is optional. You can either leave your grip completely open and allow this to move freely, or if you'd like, you can grab your grip plate. And like I said in the G&G video, these are deceiving because you'd think they'd be really easy, but you have to like put it in your hand and grip it really hard, and be careful because it has some sharp edges on it. It's because they put thread tape on these to confirm that they don't like wobble out of place. So remove this, and you're going to be left with some thread tape that's still in the grooves. So if you have a pick or like a paper clip or something, you can get most of it out. And then now you can drop this back over your grip. And snug these up without cranking them down. Now, if you really want, you can tuck this away into your stock and reapply the butt plate. But that is essentially all you need to do to install a PolarStar F2 into a Krytac of any sorts. The upper receiver is irrelevant. So if you did want to install this into a CRB or an SPR, anything along those lines, this video will allow you to do so. If you guys have any other questions or any concerns about installing an engine into your airsoft gun, feel free to comment on this video or shoot us over an email. Our customer service guys are super happy to help you, and we want to help your install go as seamlessly as possible. So thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, have an awesome day.